Welcome again to Story and Table, where Jesus invites us into his story and welcomes us to his table. In the beginning, God made a world that pulsed with goodness, a world meant to grow and to flourish. And right at the center of it, he placed humanity, his images crowned with glory and entrusted with purpose. Creation itself was meant to be kind of like a cathedral of praise. The skies and the seas, the mountains, the newborn breath, each telling the same story. God is good, God is wise, God is here. And humanity was meant to echo that story, upward in worship and outward in mission. Humans were to reflect God's glory into the world and return the world's praise back to him, kind of like an angled mirror. But the story that began in the garden quickly bent in the wrong direction. Instead of filling the world with God's glory, we filled it with our own cravings. Instead of reflecting his wisdom, we grasped for our own way. We abdicated our crown. Still the images of God, but refusing the vocation that came with it. Still sought by God, but wandering. Still bearing his likeness, but chasing our own name. And when we chase our own names long enough, the world begins to break into confusion. Rivalry takes root, violence multiplies, relationships fracture, nations rise hungry for glory. People learn to trust power more than presence, fear more than faith, self more than God. The world God intended to be filled with his renown became a world filled with competing kingdoms. So God's good creation became confused in its calling. A world where swords were easier to forge than plowshares. A world where fences felt safer than tables. A world where being without God and without hope didn't look like atheism. It looked like everyone making their own God. But God never stopped loving his world. And he never stopped loving the humans he had crowned with glory. So he stepped into the world that we broke, not with a sword, not with a throne, not with a kind of glory we keep trying to build for ourselves. He came first with covenant and promise. The children of Abraham, chosen to be for God, a people for the world. But at last he came with presence, with a body, with bread and cup in his hands. Jesus entered a world full of rivalries, Jews and Gentiles, zealots and tax collectors, Rome and everyone else, and he sat them at the same table. Strangers became neighbors. Enemies shared bread and drank. Those who once grasped for glory learned to receive it instead. The prophets of old imagined a day when the nations would stream to the mountain of the Lord, where swords would be beaten into farming tools, where people would say, "Come, let us walk in his light," where weapons became plowshares and fear gave way to fellowship. That vision begins at the table, because at the table, God is reclaiming his world one act of presence at a time. At table, glory is not seized, it's given. At table, rivalries lose their power. And at table, the glory of God in us is not erased by failure, but restored by grace. At table, the fences we build in fear are torn down. They're reshaped into longer, wider, more welcoming tables. And at the table, we don't come as those who succeeded in filling the world with God's glory. Instead, we come as those who confess that we haven't. We admit we traded his renown for our own. Yet Jesus meets us, not with accusation, but with the same presence that once walked in Eden. The presence that will one day make all things new. The presence that teaches us again how to be human. With bread and cup, God is reclaiming his world, not by overpowering it, but indwelling in it. Not by crushing enemies, but by creating a people who lay down enmity. Not by demanding glory, but by restoring ours. At the table, we remember who God is, and we remember who we are, his images, beloved, crowned with glory and honor, called to fill the world with his glory. And from this table, we rise to join him again, not to make a name for ourselves, but to bear his. This is Jesus' story that you're invited into. This is the table that you are welcome to join.